This is Trinity Storm and you are watching a movie on what if Tobirama accidentally traveled to the future. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
The Kinkaku forces were closing in. Tobirama's mind was forming and promptly discarding dozens of plans as they tree-hopped at full speed. There was no way they were all going to make it through this. Tobirama finally made a decision, taking a deep breath, and signaled his students to stop at the upcoming clearing. "One of us will have to stay behind," he said flatly. Hiraishin, his brightest student, recognized the logic in his words right away. "I'll stay, sensei, and I'll do my best to keep them at bay." Tobirama raised his head. "As long as I'm alive, none of you will be used as a pawn. You are the future of Konoha, and as my duty as Hokage and your sensei states, I'll be staying behind to provide distraction. Hiraishin, I wish for you to lead the village as the Sandaime, as it is unlikely that I'll make it. Now, make haste for Konoha and inform the village of this betrayal. I do not want any arguments." Tobirama turned back after taking one last look at his students, determined to eliminate as many Kinkaku force members as possible, giving his students the best chance of returning home alive. Tobirama was lying face down on dirt, bleeding from more injuries than he cared to count, and, more importantly, the entire Kinkaku force was dead in his hands. A normal ninja would have given up long ago, but Tobirama Senju was different. He could shape chakra as long as he was breathing. Hiraishin was still a chunin at the time. Despite his intelligence and tactical ability, he would struggle to manage Konoha's administration and military, especially with war on the horizon. Tobirama had great faith in his student, but he didn't want to abandon him. He remembered the unfinished seal he had been working on in Training Ground 44 for long-distance teleportation, which was far more likely to blow him up than to serve its intended purpose. Regardless, he was going to die. He didn't stand to lose anything. He drew the seal on the ground with his own blood, of which there was plenty, and activated it, fully prepared for instant vaporization. He was surprised to experience the familiar sensation of being teleported by Hiraishin, albeit for a longer and more nauseating period of time. He fell on his face again a few seconds later, this time on grass, which was much softer than Kumo's rocky terrain. He tensed for a moment before sensing Hashirama's Mokouten imbibed in the trees around him and relaxing. He realized he wouldn't survive unless he received immediate medical attention and flared his chakra in the standard Konoha code for medical assistance required. He hoped that someone stupid or brave enough to train in the inner sanctums of Training Ground 44 would detect it. It appeared that his luck was shining that day, because only a minute later he felt someone approaching. He rolled over to face his would-be savior, surprised to see Kagami's face looking back at him, despite the fact that he had just left his student near the border of Lightning Country, which was 2 days away from Konoha even at shinobi speed. He was about to question his student about this when the blood loss overtook him and he passed out. The last thing he saw was Kagami's terrified expression as he realized the extent of Tobirama's injuries. Despite what the rest of his clan assumed, Uchiha Shisui was neither stupid nor reckless. Nobody attained the rank of Jonin with those qualities, especially not at the age of 14. However, he was having doubts about his intelligence as he dodged another fireball from the giant caterpillar who had decided Shisui would be a delicious roasted snack. Despite his superiors' repeated warnings that the deeper sections of the Forest of Death were only supposed to be used for Anbu team survival training, Shisui had entered the training ground without any backup. He wasn't blind to the danger or overconfident in his abilities. But, with the recent escalation of tensions between the village and the Uchiha clan, and the growing likelihood of him using brainwashing genjutsu against his own relatives, he'd had enough. The discovery that Itachi had been spying on the clan did not help matters. For a while, he just wanted to get away from it all, the village, the clan, Itachi, and his teammates. With that mindset, Training Ground 44 appeared to be a good choice. He was regretting his past self's decision 12 giant crickets, 7 acid-spitting leopards, and 6 pyromaniac caterpillars later, breathing heavily with more scrapes, burns, and bruises than he cared to count. He was about to flee the forest, never to return, when he felt a chakra flare in the pattern of an ancient Konoha code, taught to him by Grandpa Kagami. Despite his concerns about intruders, Shisui pursued the source of the signal. Even if it was an enemy shinobi, detaining him was preferable to leaving him with direct access to the village if he managed to get past the killer forest. He noticed a shinobi with his face down on the ground in a clearing not far from Shisui's original location. He had spiky hair like Hitoki Senpai and various injuries that appeared to be from ninja weapons rather than any beast of the forest. Shisui approached the shinobi, who rolled over to reveal a face Shisui couldn't help but recognize before passing out. On the Hokage mountain, he saw it almost every day. Shisui had not anticipated this. The second Hokage was unconscious in the Forest of Death with life-threatening injuries, despite the fact that he should have been dead and buried long before Shisui was born. Oh my goodness, were those intestines poking out? Shisui, please calm down. Simply treat it as a mission. In a restricted area of the village, there is an unconscious shinobi with fatal injuries and a suspicious background. Take him to the Anbu headquarters emergency rooms. Will his injuries be aggravated when he is moved? Yes. If the shinobi is not moved, will he live long enough to be interrogated? No. Shisui made his decision in 2 seconds, after which he carefully picked up the Neodaime, or a really good impersonator, and shunshined to the Anbu HQ. As she regained consciousness, Tobirama instinctively scanned the room for chakra signatures. There were none in the immediate vicinity, so he could open his eyes. He found himself in a cell with chakra-suppressing seals. He would have assumed he had been captured by Kumo if it hadn't been for the seals. But even if their lives depended on it, Kumo Ninja couldn't create such seals. Tobirama also recognized them as a modified version of his own design. As a result, he was in Konoha. Before he could ponder the various scenarios that could have led to his own village imprisoning him, the door opened to reveal a short, elderly man dressed in Hokage robes. Tobirama, on the other hand, was preoccupied with his chakra signature. "Hiraishin?" he exclaimed. What had happened to turn his adolescent student into a gaffer in less than a month, even in the worst-case scenario? The elderly gentleman, Hiraishin, smiled. "It's good to see you again, sensei. I apologize for the confinement, but no exceptions can be made. Despite the fact that I recognize your chakra, you've been missing in action for half a century." Tobirama never admitted it, but he gaped. "Would you be willing to go on a mind walk? It would make the process of reinstating you much easier," his student inquired, not hiding his amusement. Tobirama's brain took a moment to restart. A half-century? What about time travel? It was thought to be impossible, but that didn't matter much to Tobirama. He'd defied the realm of impossibility far too many times. An incomplete space-time seal with a 1 in a million chance of completing its mission was certainly capable of producing such bizarre results. Tobirama preferred this to being blown up, but he wasn't so naive to believe that all of his loved ones would have survived the storm of time for 50 years. Wait. When Kagami found me in the forest, he didn't look any older. Ah. Shisui-kun looks a lot like his grandfather, but surely you noticed his chakra was different? Grandfather? That was going to need some getting used to. Tobirama took a moment to center himself before responding. Training Ground 44 is saturated with Hashirama's chakra, making it difficult to distinguish different chakra signatures unless I concentrate. which I had neglected to do due to my delirium from blood loss. Hiraishin nodded, as he usually did when Tobirama explained something to him. I'll agree to a mind walk by the Yamanaka clan head, Tobirama said, answering Hiraishin's previous question. Not only did he have classified information that only the highest-ranking Yamanaka should have access to, but he didn't want his mind invaded by an untrained one who wouldn't know how to suppress involuntary emotional implantation. He already had enough on his plate without the added baggage of someone else. Shisui stood alongside the Hokage and his council as the suspected, most likely actual, Neodaime Hokage was subjected to the Yamanaka scan by Inoichi Yamanaka, who had been specially called back on duty despite being retired from T&I. The caution was necessary, of course, because it wasn't every day that someone claimed to be Tobirama Senju and was almost believed. The Hokage had told Shisui that he was certain that this was the real Neodaime and that the mind scan was just a formality, just before asking him to be the time-displaced Hokage's guide to modern Konoha. Tobirama-sensei is a very picky person. I doubt he would refuse anyone else, the Sandaime elaborated. But why would he choose me? He has no idea who I am, Shisui inquired calmly. No, he didn't whine. Uchiha don't whine. He was acquainted with your grandfather. You have a lot in common with him, and not just in appearance. Oh, they're finished. Inoichi-san was indeed leaving the room to give his report. His name is Tobirama Senju, Neodaime Hokage, he declared. I warned you, Sandaime-sama chuckled. Shisui, go ahead. You don't want to keep him waiting any longer. Shisui, ever the dutiful shinobi, entered the interrogation room. He wasn't nervous, and neither were the Uchihas. He knew from previous experience that a Yamanaka scan causes the victim to become disoriented, so he patiently waited for Neodaime-sama to reorient himself to his surroundings. It didn't take long for him to be the recipient of a stare from two non-Sharingan red eyes. You're Kagame's grandson, said the second Hokage. He didn't realize it was a question and rushed to respond, Hi, Neodaime-sama. His response was greeted with a frown, I'm not Hokage anymore. I've given my hat away. Hello, Neodaime-sa. What should I call you? Tobirama, the former Hokage said, raising an eyebrow. Shisui could do this because he had previous experience with one-word answers, social inadequacy, and genius. Do you want to go to the library? Itachi always goes to books when he doesn't know something, and perhaps Tobirama-sama would prefer to fill his knowledge gaps through books rather than asking questions and revealing his ignorance. That would be fine, he replied. Tobirama-sama was not impressed with much of Konoha's history after his supposed death. The Second and Third Shinobi Wars, the destruction of Uzushio, the Kyuubi attack, the Hyuga incident. The list went on. Oh, he didn't say anything. It was just the way his mouth would twist whenever Shisui clarified a point which had been glossed over by the history books, due to whitewashing and propid. The real kicker didn't come until the end of the day, when Shisui was driving the former Hokage to Yakiniku-Q and noticed a large crowd gathered in front of the restaurant, and the owner was shouting at a little boy Shisui recognized as the Kyuubi Jinchuruchi. Nothing was taken from me. I gave you some money. Despite the tears and snot on his face, the kid was shouting and trying to put on a brave face. Be silent, brat. As if I'd give anything to a monster, the owner became enraged and raised his hand to strike the young boy, but he was stopped by none other than the second Hokage. What exactly is going on here? In a dangerous tone, he inquired. Naruto was hungry, and Ichiraku Ramen was closed because Tucci-san had broken his arm falling downstairs, so he went near the civilian district to try his luck at Yakiniku-Q, which he had heard good things about from Choji. But, as usual, the restaurant owner had some unexplained grudge against Naruto and accused him of stealing. He wouldn't hear of Naruto defending himself, and, as usual, there wouldn't be any help from the crowd. Naruto was about to flee from another public humiliation when a white-haired geezer stopped the restaurant owner from hitting him. "What exactly is going on here?" he asked in a terrifying tone. Because he hadn't assumed Naruto was to blame, the blonde-haired prankster rushed to explain his side of the story. "I only wanted to buy food, but he's telling everyone I tried to steal meat. That is not correct. I paid him 800 ryo, and why would I want to steal meat when I don't even cook? Even if he had stolen something, you are supposed to lodge a complaint with the police, not assault a child publicly," the old man said before turning back to the owner. "Do you have no idea who he is? He is a demon brat." Naruto was spit on by the teme. "I'm well aware of who he is. Konoha's Jinchuriki, the container of the nine-tailed demon fox and the human sacrifice who protects Konoha on a daily basis. He should be honored rather than reviled. Senju Mito, my sister-in-law, was Kyuubi's first Jinchuriki, and I would not have her legacy belittled in this way." "Aw drat," Naruto heard the curly-haired Uchiha beside the white-haired man mutter as he tried to comprehend what had been revealed about him. He had heard him referred to as the demon brat, of course, but he never imagined in his wildest dreams that he actually contained the Kyuubi within him. Curly interrupted his thought. "Tobirama-sama, Naruto-kun, I think we need to go to the Hokage office now." When Naruto noticed that everyone in the crowd was staring at the white-haired dude, Tobirama, Curly had called him, with wide eyes, as if he had committed some unthinkable crime. He was rudely picked up by Curly and carried to Gigi's office with the swirly lead teleportation thing. As he tried not to vomit on Gigi's new carpet, which wasn't difficult because he hadn't eaten much that day, he tried to recall where he had heard the name Tobirama before. Sarutobi Hiraishin was a tired old man. He had been a Hokage for more than 50 years, and it had aged him far more cruelly than any other job could have. He had been willing to hand over the hat to Minato for 7 years, and he had done so. Minato, a bright young man, was supposed to lead the village to heights Hiraishin had been afraid to imagine, while Hiraishin enjoyed retirement with his wife and children. Then, Minato had killed himself and turned his infant son into a Jinchuriki, and Hiraishin had to take back the hat before he could bury his wife. For the good of the village. That was all his life had been, for the good of the village, since Tobirama Sensei had passed him the hat. Tobirama Sensei had returned, as young and full of energy as he had been when they last saw him, which was fortunate because he would need his energy when Hiraishin gave him back his hat. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door, which was strange because his Anbu wouldn't normally allow anyone to get close to his office without Hiraishin's approval, except when it was Naruto, but the young boy was too boisterous to even knock politely, leading him to believe that his sensei had decided to visit him. "Come in," he said, and was proven correct when Tobirama Sensei entered his office, accompanied by a sheepish Shisui and, to his surprise, Naruto. "Gigi. Why didn't you tell me I'm a Jinchuriki?" yelled the blonde boy. Hiraishin's eyebrows rose at those words, and he didn't need to ask who told him. "Naruto-kun, that is a S-class secret. Please do not bring this up in public," he informed the youngster. Naruto scrunched up his brow, however, Ji-san did. "You don't intend to punish him, do you?" Tobirama Sensei raised an eyebrow at Hiraishin as he looked at him. Hiraishin actually laughed at this. "No, I will not punish him. Why don't you go with Shisui-kun, and if you're good, he'll show you some cool jutsu." "Really? Curly Nissan, come on. I'll be fantastic." Hiraishin smiled as the boy dragged one of his best ninjas out of his office. "He's an Uzumaki," Sensei said. "He is," Hiraishin agreed, "but there is no one left of his clan." "Tsunade, what about you?" "She hasn't set foot in the village in 15 years. What has she been up to?" Drinking, gambling, and wasting time, it's certainly superior to my other student, who is conducting experiments on children and dissecting their corpses. Tobirama Sensei gave him a brief look before speaking. I believe you have carried this burden for a long enough time. I'll carry it for you as long as I'm able. Hiraishin removed his hat, feeling a huge weight lift from his shoulders, and handed it to his sensei, a tear streaming down his cheek. Thank you, he said quietly. Tobirama hadn't had much time to think about his decision and its consequences because he had trusted his students' intelligence and will of fire to guide him and his other students to support their comrade and new Hokage. Even though it had only been a few days, he couldn't believe how naive his former self had been. Sure, Hiraishin hadn't completely screwed up, and Konoha had survived. Actually, Konoha had survived. It wasn't strong, it wasn't stable, and it certainly wasn't the haven of peace Hashirama had intended. 70 years after the founding of Konoha and 3 great shinobi wars, one of which resulted in the destruction of Uchiha, peace seemed even further away than it did during the Warring Clans era, made worse by the fact that Konoha itself had no peace. The clans were still as segregated as they had been since the village's founding, with no corporation happening outside of the old alliances. Civilian-born ninja were shunted off to Genin Corps and given no proper guidance to grow. The Jinchuriki was treated like a village pariah. Danzo had fallen low enough to train an army of emotionless child soldiers in ways that would even put Hidden Mist to shame. This was a shambles, and Tobirama was the one who had to clean it up, he thought as Hiraishin told him about the increased power of the civilian council and changes to the academy curriculum. Stop. Tobirama said emphatically, let us tackle one issue at a time. Who is Naruto legal Kun's guardian? Tobirama wanted to be the guardian of the Uzumaki child, but it couldn't be fair to him if his guardian had to split his loyalties between the village and him. Hiraishin groaned, Jiraiya, my student. His parents chose him to be Naruto godfather. Kun's he is, however, in charge of Konoha's spy network and cannot spend much time in the village. So I'll reassign the guardianship. Are there any of Naruto parents' Kun's friends who would be willing to take him in? The Neodaime inquired. For years, Uchiha Makoto has been petitioning for his guardianship. She was Kushina's friend. Chan's, however, it would be unwise to entrust the Jinchuriki's guardianship to a rebellious clan. I think it's the perfect solution, hitting 2 birds with 1 stone, Tobirama thought. But Hiraishin, Naruto Seal Kun's is so well crafted that even I, let alone the Uchiha, can't open it without a key. Giving Naruto guardianship Kun's to Uchiha Makoto would help convey our trust in them. It would be a step forward to reach a peaceful solution. Sensei. What were your plans in response to the coup? He interjected. I was hoping they'd abandon their plans after realizing they wouldn't stand a chance against Konoha's collective might. Tobirama couldn't help but snort at that. What about the Uchiha? Surrendering in the face of impossibility? One thing I've learned about that clan is that they're as stubborn as mules. If they believe it is right to carry out the coup, they will do so regardless of the chances of success. The only way to stop them would be to either convince them that a coup isn't necessary or to commit genocide on a large scale. Hiraishin's silence indicated that he had given thought to the idea of genocide, and Tobirama found it difficult to compare this tired old man to the bright-eyed, optimistic young man he knew, or had known. Shisui, who is he? Is he in favor of the coup? He inquired. No. He and Itachi, the clan heir, have been spying on their clan for the village. They are also attempting to put a stop to the plans.
Shisui would have a hard time with that.
Despite his position, he is still a teenager. He wouldn't have much clout among the elders. What is the heir's age? 12, Hiraishin replied, causing Tobirama to look at him incredulously. 12? How has he been relaying information to you? Has he completed his academy homework? Or maybe not, he murmured, before calling out, "Crow." He asked, as a brief flare of irritation in chakra drew his attention to one of the Anbu stationed in the room. The next thing he knew, a small Anbu agent was standing in front of him. "Take off your mask," Tobirama said. The Anbu quickly obeyed, revealing the face of a preteen Uchiha. "Didn't I write a provision limiting admission to Anbu to those under the age of 15? The Neodaime inquired of his pupil. "I changed it to make the minimum age 13, the responder said. "Did you also alter the numbering system so that 13 comes before 12? "Itachi-kun here was an exception," Hiraishin said, as the boy stood silently with a blank expression on his face. "Is that correct?" "I'm afraid I can't let this go on, Uchiha-kun," Tobirama murmured. "Please remove your mask. I mean no disrespect, Neodaime-sama, but my father would consider this an insult," the boy said after a brief pause. The words could be interpreted as a frivolous threat from an entitled brat, but Itachi's solemn tone suggested that he was more concerned about the impact of his demotion on village-clan relations. "And would he still consider this an insult if I hired you as my apprentice?" That seemed to calm the Uchiha for a moment. "No, Neodaime-sama, he wouldn't," he replied flatly. "Then return home and inform your father, Itachi-kun." Before vanishing, the young boy bowed deeply. "What is an apprentice?" Hiraishin spoke up. "Not that I disagree, but you know very little about him." "What prompted you to accept him as a student, sensei?" "The same thing that compelled me to accept you and your teammates as students, the will of fire." Time was a strange thing. It healed wounds, distorted memories, and changed people's perceptions so drastically that they couldn't recognize their former selves. Shimura Danzo realized this the day he heard that the Neodaime had miraculously appeared in Konoha, alive and not a day older than he had been last seen. His initial reaction had been disbelief. There was no way that an alive, and supposedly immortal, Senju Tobirama would stay away from Konoha after it had been through 2 wars. When Yamanaka Inoichi performed a mind walk on the individual and declared him to be the real Senju Tobirama who had time traveled due to a ceiling accident, Danzo's reaction was dread, not joy that his sensei was alive. Over the years, even after his sensei's death, Danzo had served Konoha in a way that the Neodaime would be proud of. Hiraishin was a soft Hokage who, unlike Tobirama sensei, lacked the courage to make difficult decisions, so Danzo immersed himself in darkness to give Konoha a fighting chance in the wars. But now that he knows the Neodaime has returned, Danzo isn't so sure his methods will be approved by his sensei, who has decided to reclaim the hat. When he was summoned to the Hokage's office the day after the Neodaime's second inauguration, he was proven correct. "Danzo," Tobirama sensei said as he entered the office, his gaze fixed on his paperwork. "Hokage-sama," he said, his voice emotionless, "you called me?" "Yes." "I'd have thought that a change in regime would be enough to compel the Hokage's council to meet the new Hokage, but now that I can sense Kageme's Sharingan beneath your bandages, I understand why you wouldn't want to meet me," the Hokage responded. Danzo didn't respond because he didn't have to. "I'm assuming you took his eye because there's no record of Kagame bequeathing it to you?" "Yes, I took it from his corpse," he confirmed. Tobirama sensei raised his head, and Danzo felt those fiery eyes pierce his soul. "I've been going over the paperwork." "What triggered the Third Great Shinobi War?"
I did.
The mission of Hitaki Sakumo had been sabotaged. War would have started sooner or later, but Konoha would have benefited the most from it at the time, Danzo felt compelled to explain, despite the fact that the man in front of him was decades his junior. And did it work? Did the war benefit Konoha? It didn't, he admitted, his face flushed. Nobody benefits from war, Danzo. I thought I had taught you that lesson successfully, but apparently not. I have a mission for you, the Hokage stated. Is it a mission? Yes. It is one that is appropriate for someone with your abilities. You must find the missing nin Orochimaru, defeat him and return him to Konoha, dead or alive, and rehabilitate any victims he kidnapped to experiment on, regardless of nationality. This is a one-man mission. Orochimaru is an opponent of the S-class. Even 3 Anbu teams would be insufficient to match him, and would be wasteful when he can be handled by a single shinobi. Danzo, while a war veteran and accomplished ninja, was an old and crippled shinobi, while Orochimaru was still in his prime. He would almost certainly be capable of defeating Orochimaru, but this mission would almost certainly end in his death. Still, it was a mission given to him by his Hokage, a Hokage he respected, a Hokage who was ruthless enough to send his own former student to his death just to get it over with. Danzo didn't fear that Konoha would be in safe hands even if he died at the hands of Orochimaru. As you command, Hokage-sama, he replied, bowing his head before departing for what could be his final mission in life. That's awesome, Shisui said as he sat down on a branch. Kagami Jichin wasn't even a proper apprentice. You will be the first Uchiha to serve as a Hokage's apprentice. Itachi sighed, his expression almost identical to his father's when he told him of Niidaime decision Sama's to remove him from the Anbu and hire him as an apprentice, albeit with less enthusiasm and more arrogance. Don't you see the issue here? He inquired, taking a seat in the tree opposite Shisui. Problem? What is the issue? This appears to be the solution to all of our problems, Shisui stated. More like postponing all of our problems. After being named the Hokage's apprentice, the clan expects me to succeed him when he retires. So? Shisui inquired, dumbfounded. So? Niidaime-sama is known to despise the Uchiha. He would never choose me to be his successor. He only hired me as an apprentice to help defuse the coup situation, Itachi objected. Shisui began shaking his head before Itachi finished speaking. I believe you are completely incorrect. Why don't you discuss it with Niidaime-sama? He's your Shisho now, and this is the type of thing he can assist you with. Itachi made a blink. Are you certain? Yeah. A master is similar to a third parent. And I doubt he would have taken on such a burden if he despised you. His hatred for the Uchiha is greatly exaggerated. He was responsible for the deaths of many Uchiha during our clan's war, but what was he supposed to do? Rolling over and dying? Shisui stated. Why not put us in charge of the police force to keep us safe in the village? Itachi questioned, his faith in his father's teachings shaky. It was due to the risk of bloodline theft, according to Kagami Journal. Jichin's the Hyuga had their seal, and Niidaime-sama had volunteered to design a better deal for both clans, but trust was an issue with newly established peace. So, the police force, to keep our village's weaker members safe. Perhaps I shouldn't go in with preconceived notions based on incorrect facts, Itachi pondered. You absolutely should not, Shisui agreed, he's a wonderful person. I spent the day with him, showing him around. I believe he is similar to you. What about you? Itachi inquired, surprised. So, when will you get the Uzumaki kit? Shisui dodged. Itachi averted his gaze but let it go. Ka-san said we'd go as soon as she could get the documents from the Hokage Tower, which is currently quite busy due to the new administration. She doesn't want Danzo to have any more ammunition against the clan. Oh, you didn't hear? Shisui informed them that Danzo had left on a mission. Honestly, don't you listen to gossip? It's all over the place in the village. According to Genma, who was on gate duty, S rank. That's unusual, Itachi observed, and I have a feeling things will change a lot around here. Shisui laughed, you'll get close to the center of the shift. By the way, why aren't you there right now? After reviewing my work hours, Niidaime-sama granted me a week off. Apparently, I'm getting older and need to get more sleep and rest, Itachi grumbled. There you have it, Itachi. You almost sounded like a real adolescent. Only if you weren't complaining about getting a vacation, Shisui made a joke. Itachi was about to respond when he noticed footsteps approaching the clearing. Your limplet is on its way, Shisui said, but Itachi ignored him and jumped to the ground. Aniki, Aniki, Sasuke yelled as he dashed into the clearing, coming to a halt in front of Itachi and exhaling heavily. Outoto, what's the rush? Itachi inquired. Ka-san requested that I bring you. We're going to meet our new sibling, Sasuke responded with a smile. How about right now? She planned to wait for the paperwork, Itachi expressed surprise. An Anbu arrived to present it to her. She says we're leaving right now, but she doesn't say anything else. You understand, don't you?
Who is our new sibling?
Isn't he younger than me? What were his parents' names? And Shisui, hidden in the trees, was laughing quietly as Sasuke rambled. Okay, now relax. I'll answer your questions one at a time, Itachi said as he started walking towards their house, knowing that Ka-san had asked him to come right away. He is, in fact, a few months younger than you. His mother, a friend of Ka-san, died when he was a baby, as did his father. That's terrible, Sasuke said, frowning. Who was he living with up until now? He spent some time at the orphanage. However, he has been living alone for the past 3 years. Why hadn't Ka-san gotten him sooner? That's a little tricky. When you're older, I'll tell you. Sasuke huffed, as one would expect, I'm no longer a little kid. I'm even getting a younger brother today. Alright, then, I'll let you know when you're chunin, Itachi corrected himself. That's not fair, Aniki, moaned Sasuke. Naruto couldn't believe he hadn't recognized the second Hokage when he rescued him from the enraged barbecue man. He had seen that giant face, along with the other 3 Hokage, for as long as he could remember. Of course, he hadn't expected to meet the second, who had died like a million years ago, and neither had anyone else. It was really funny seeing everyone's faces at the Hokage inauguration, and it would be even funnier if the Shoden came back from the dead next and demanded his hat back. Of course, that would make Naruto's ambition of becoming Hokage 1,000 times harder, so he didn't want it to happen. A knock at Naruto's door interrupted his thoughts. He opened the door, wondering who it could be, only to be met by a very pretty dark-haired woman with big eyes, who was smiling at him, which was unusual because people didn't smile at Naruto. His admiration for the attractive woman was cut short by an exclamation of "Dobi." Uchiha Sasuke was standing beside the lovely lady, speaking in a familiar tone. Teme, Naruto said as the woman, who appeared to be Sasuke's mother, scolded him, language, Sasuke. But, Ka-san, the Teme objected. But, no. Is that how you intend to greet your new brother? She cut him off before turning to Naruto, who was perplexed. Naruto-kun, my name is Uchiha Makoto. Before she died, I was good friends with your mother. I'd like to care for you as your son now that Niidaime-sama has approved my adoption request. Naruto simply stared at her for a few seconds. The words had reached his brain, but perhaps something was preventing him from understanding them correctly. Because that couldn't be true, could it? Sasuke's mom couldn't want to adopt him. Maybe it was a joke? Is it a joke? Because it's not a very good one, Datbeo, he asked. Oh, Naruto-kun. No, it isn't, Sasuke said emphatically, crossing his arms across his chest. For days, Ka-san has been waiting for the paperwork. And Aniki has returned home to prepare your room. Of course, this isn't a joke. I guess I'll call you Autoto instead of Dode now that you're my little brother. You should start addressing me as Ni-sama. Naruto stared at Sasuke, then at his mother, who was hiding a smile behind her hand, but the kindness in her eyes was genuine. I'm not going to be your little brother, Teme, Naruto protested, beginning to believe the two of them. Even if Sasuke was a jerk, he wouldn't pull such a cruel prank on Naruto. You'll be the one who addresses me as Ni-sama. It's obvious that I'm the superior being. That is not correct. You're also younger than I am. Aniki stated as much. Tell him, Ka-san, Sasuke inquired. Yes, Sasuke is 2 months older than you, Naruto-kun, Mikoto-san replied. PHH, 2 months, Naruto chuckled, 2 months don't matter. They do, the Teme grumbled. Okay, both of you, calm down. We've come to pack Naruto-kun and transport him to our house. Don't argue about the significance of a 2-month age difference, Mikoto-san gently reprimanded. Now, get to work. It is your mission as a Konoha shinobi. Collect and pack Naruto belongings. Cons. Will you be able to assist, Ka-san? Sasuke inquired, peering into Naruto's filthy apartment through the open door. As a Jonin, I'll keep an eye on things. If you come across something you can't handle, I'll assist you, she responded. You don't have to worry about that, Sasuke's mother, Naruto said, his wildest grin ever on his face. There's nothing Uzumaki Naruto can't handle. Kakashi crept into the Hokage's office through the window, only to be stopped in his tracks by the sight of more than a dozen Senju Tobirama working on a mountain of paperwork. It took a second for his brain to register that he was looking at shadow clones, and he wondered why the Sandame didn't use the technique to finish his paperwork. Ah, Hound, said one of the Neodaime, most likely the original, are you up for a mission? At your command, Hokage-sama, knelt Kakashi in front of the Neodaime who addressed him. I'm at ease. Are you familiar with the Root organization? Hokage-sama, you are correct. I used to be a member of Root, he agreed. That will make things easier for you, said the Neodaime. Root is currently being disbanded. Your mission is to take as many Anbu teams as you need for a raid on the Root headquarters, arrest every member, and transport them to interrogation. Kakashi thought about it for a minute. Not torture and interrogation? He finally asked. It was renamed today, said the Hokage. When I mentioned the previous name in passing, the daimyo expressed some reservations. Do you have any questions? The Root operatives have a seal on their tongue that prevents them from speaking about the organization, so T and I, interrogation, would be unable to extract anything from them. I'm aware of the seal, and they have the schematic to remove them, I replied. If nothing else comes up, I'll have your report in 3 days. At the dismissal, Kakashi quietly slipped away, his mind already devising a strategy to complete the mission with minimal bloodshed. In the end, none of his plans were necessary, as the Root operatives surrendered peacefully to the Anbu, as the Hokage was their commanding officer with Danzo out of the village. Simply informing them that Hokage-sama had ordered their presence at interrogation resulted in their compliance. 3 days later, Kakashi stood in front of the Hokage, handing over his mission report. We were able to detain 43 operatives and 20 trainees aged 5 to 9 years old, all of whom surrendered without resistance. 2 teams of 3 and 4 members each are currently on a mission with unknown whereabouts. I've assigned Owl to search their headquarters for any information on the said missions. How did the interrogations go? asked the Neodaime, who seemed unconcerned about the missing operatives. With the help of the schematic you provided, the seals on their tongues were easily removed, but they still refused to answer questions about Root and Danzo. They claim to be loyal to Konoha and the Hokage, but their loyalty to Danzo supersedes everything. I see, the Hokage said, his face unruffled. Take care of their relocations, then. Offer them a place in the archive or the Anbu, depending on their preference. As for the children, if they have any clan or guardians, return them to their homes. The rest will be made wards of the Anbu. Kakashi couldn't help but wonder, the Anbu, Hokage-sama? Anbu are supposed to be completely loyal to the Hokage above all else, but they will be jeopardized the moment Danzo returns. That wouldn't be a problem, the Hokage said, dismissing his concerns. I beg your pardon, Hokage-sama, but I believe it would. Danzo may have been your student 5 decades ago, but he wouldn't have the same loyalties to you now, and he even tried to assassinate Sandaime-sama. Kakashi exclaimed. The Neodaime raised an eyebrow in response to his outburst. Through you, if I'm not mistaken? Kakashi had the decency to blush in response. It didn't matter, though, because of his 2 masks. I'm aware that Danzo isn't the same person I knew as my student, but I'm not concerned about what will happen when he returns because he is very unlikely to return from the suicide mission I've sent him on, the Hokage continued. Kakashi was taken aback by the Hokage's revelation. And if he does return? He countered. Then I'll handle it.
That was the end of it.
Kakashi nodded and left to begin the difficult task of relocating the former Root operatives. He suspected that the majority of them would end up in Anbu. Nara Shikaku was an intelligent man who was rarely surprised. Having devised and decided multiple scenarios in his mind and their approximate probability, he knew what to expect most of the time. But he was surprised to see the Neodaime in his office's waiting room that morning. Please come in, Hokage-sama. You could have summoned me, he stammered. Another unusual occurrence. You have your own work, Nara-san. I just wanted some answers. It's not a problem for me to walk a few blocks, the Hokage replied. Of course, what can I do for you? Shikaku asked, motioning for the Hokage to take a seat. I've been reading some recent reports and have noticed that 2 out of every 3 Jonin are failing their Genin teams, particularly those with non-clan Genin, and I was hoping that you might be able to help me understand why? Neodaime-sama asked, his voice conveying the gravity of the situation. It's not prejudice, if that's what you're thinking. The Academy standards have declined significantly over the last few years, especially during peacetime. The graduation exams consist of performing 3 E-rank jutsu. The clans can compensate for the education of their children, but the other graduates, orphans, civilian-born children, are not ready for anything beyond D ranks when they graduate, which are basically chores these days, Shikaku responded. That made the Neodaime frown. I see, and why have the Academy's standards sunk so low? Shikaku was well aware that the Neodaime was personally responsible for the Academy's establishment, so he had to tread carefully. Since the Kyuubi attack, the Civilian Council has gained a lot of clout, pushing for lower graduation requirements because civilian-born children found it difficult to pass the exam. I'd prefer that you be honest with me, Nara-san, the Neodaime said, giving him a look. I'd like to hear your thoughts on the Academy model. Very well, Hokage-sama. I don't think the Academy model works. You'd have seen it if you'd stayed in power after it was established, especially now that the civilian population has grown, Shikaku began calmly, taking a breath. The students in the Academy are a diverse group. They all have different upbringings, chakra capacity, blood limit, literacy, intelligence. I don't think lumping them together for a few years teaching them the fundamentals of shinobi arts and then putting them on a team of 3 with a jonin to do missions is the best way to teach our future shinobi. TBE Hokage paused for a moment before responding, do you have an alternative? Dozens, Shikaku said, assuming his thinking pose. The best one would be assigning teams early on and assigning them chunin teachers instead of jonin, and having them perform D ranks as academy students. Genin promotion should be given after survival and combat evaluation. That's a good plan, agreed the Hokage. A little ambitious, but I hope it won't disrupt your routine too much to get it started before the next academic year, he said as he stood up. Shikaku stared in silence as the Hokage left his office. Troublesome. He muttered, finally. Itachi dodged another strike coming his way, leaping backwards to gain space. He quickly went through the great fireball jutsu hand signs, only for his opponent to dodge with seemingly no effort. He barely ducked in time to avoid a kick to the head, only to be caught by a jet of water. As he tried to regain his bearings, a kunai appeared at his throne. Yield? His opponent inquired. I yield, he said, for the 3rd time that day. You're getting better, Tobirama Sensei observed. Good work on the genjutsu affecting balance. It didn't affect you, Itachi protested, only to be stared down by his teacher. I hope you're not judging all of your genjutsu by whether or not they work on me. Why not? He countered. If they're good, they should work on anyone. Genjutsu doesn't affect me, Itachi. Itachi questioned, is that even possible? Why don't you tell me? How could you be immune to genjutsu? If Itachi had learned anything in the previous week, it was that Tobirama Sensei never missed a teaching opportunity, whether it was life lessons or shinobi arts. As his teacher waited patiently, he pondered the question for a few moments before responding. Is it because you can detect foreign chakra entering your system and dispel it before it affects your senses? Tobirama Sensei complimented, that is a good answer. If Izuna hadn't caught me in a genjutsu that affected my chakra sense, it would have been the right one. How would a genjutsu to affect chakra sensing work? Itachi inquired, curious about a genjutsu he had never heard of. I'm not sure. You'd have to look into your clan archives, his teacher admitted. However, the answer to my previous question is seals. I invented seals that prevent foreign chakra from entering my system at all. It backfired a little when even medical chakra wouldn't work on me when I was severely injured, so I had to make a few additions to the seal after that. He sat up straighter. And speaking of medics, a well-known one is currently arriving at Konoha's gates. Itachi deduced, Tsunade-sama? It wasn't difficult. Tsunade-sama was the only well-known doctor he'd heard of. Furthermore, she was related to Sensei. Yes, Sensei said as he extended his hand. I'll teleport us to the gates. Try not to eat anything. Itachi nodded and braced himself before shaking Sensei's hand. The next moment, he felt being squeezed through a microscopic tube and appeared near the main gates, gasping a bit. At least, he didn't throw up like the first time. I don't care. If the Neodaime is truly back, get him to the gates. I'm not going inside if this turns out to be some sensei-concocted scheme to get me back here. A blonde woman, Itachi assumed to be Tsunade, was shouting at the Chunin guard on duty before falling silent when she noticed Tobirama Sensei. I'm here, Suna, and you can stop terrorizing the poor Chunin, Sensei gently said. Ji-chan? Tsunade asked quietly, suddenly sounding vulnerable. It's me, Suna. You can tell, can't you? Tsunade nodded, her stern expression returning. How are you? Was it that jutsu you created that brought you back? No, I'm afraid it was a space-time seal accident. Itachi noticed a small smile on Tsunade's face as she responded. Only you, Jii-chan. Does that mean I'm now older than you? You sure don't look like it, Tobirama-sensei said, probably to avoid a trap, before motioning for Itachi to come forward. I'd like to introduce you to my apprentice, Itachi. Tsunade observed Itachi as he stepped forward and bowed respectfully before introducing her own apprentice, Shizune, who had appeared breathing heavily while they were talking, carrying a small pig. Will you be coming inside? Sensei inquired, as both of them remained visibly outside the gates. Tsunade retorted, what if we don't? Then you don't, Sensei replied. But then you don't get to come back, Suna. You don't get to run away from your duties and enjoy your rights. So, after everything I've done for Konoha, you'll just declare me a missing nin? She queried. I'm not going to declare you a missing nin. I'm going to declare you a shinobi with no connection to Konoha and remove you from the citizens' register, was the response. You've been drinking and gambling your life away, and that shouldn't reflect on Konoha. You don't have to remain a shinobi if you return, though. You can retire. You can restore the Senju clan compound, which I haven't had time for. You can work on implementing that medical program you proposed before leaving. You can heal, rather than keeping your wounds fresh and bleeding. Itachi observed the slug Sanin's indecision for quite some time. He worried a few times that she'd just turn away and leave, but after a few minutes, a determined expression appeared on her face before she took Shizune's hand and took a step inside Konoha. The hideout was blown up, as was Danzo's body. He must have used some suicide jutsu, Jiraiya said, gently placing a body scroll on Tobirama's desk. That's him, or at least what's left of him. Tobirama stared blankly at the scroll before saying, thank you for bringing back his remains. Whatever his flaws, he had sacrificed a lot for this village, and he will be buried with honor. Tobirama carefully diverted his attention away from his happy memories of teaching Danzo. He didn't get to mourn his student because he had essentially sent his student to death, hoping for the same outcome. He was the Hokage, and it was his responsibility to make sacrifices for the sake of the village. What about Orochimaru? He wondered. Jiraiya shrugged. I have no idea. I didn't find his body at the hideout, but that doesn't say much because there wasn't much anyone could find there. Tobirama groaned. Anko Seal Sans was still active yesterday, containing his yin chakra. Given that this incident occurred 3 days ago, it is unlikely that Orochimaru died as a result of this. Jiraiya agreed, he's a slippery snake. Then I'll get back on his trail. No. No? Don't you want him found and killed? Isn't that why Danzo was sent after him? I do, but there's no point in trying to find him right now because he'd have holed up somewhere discreet after this attack, Tobirama explained. Keep an eye on his activities as you do with all of Konoha's enemies, but don't pay too much attention to him. We'll take care of him when he comes out of hiding. Very well. I'll relax for a while. Haven't been able to visit Konoha's bathhouses in quite some time, Jiraiya said as he turned to leave. Tobirama reminded him as he crossed the door, don't forget to visit your godson. Jiraiya stiffened for a split second before proceeding on his way, waving a distracted farewell to the Hokage. Tobirama raised his head. All 3 of Hiraishin's students had outlandish personalities. He was returning to his pepperwork when he noticed an unfamiliar chakra signature enter his range. He knew that hundreds of visitors entered Konoha every day and wouldn't have paid it much attention if it hadn't been for the nature of its chakra. He had only felt this type of chakra twice before. Once in his brother and other in Anbu cat who had been experimented on by Orochimaru in his childhood for the aim of replicating this exact chakra nature. Whoever this signature belonged to, possessed the Mokuton. Tobirama quickly teleported to the nearest Hiraishin marker, bringing him to Training Ground 3, near the Memorial Stone. A quick scan of the surroundings revealed Hound, or more precisely Hitaki Kakashi, kneeling in front of the Memorial Stone, startled by the unexpected appearance of his Hokage but not on guard. Oh, he hasn't picked up on the other ninja. A surprisingly familiar genjutsu that the Uchiha used during the Warring Clan era was hiding him from all the senses. Tobirama's senses had become muddled as he approached the genjutsu-affected area. Tobirama quickly gathered his chakra and released in a spike, spreading it around a bit to also break the genjutsu's effect on Hitaki. He didn't have any idea of the enemy's threat level. He might require assistance. The genjutsu faded, revealing a black-haired man wearing an orange spiraled mask and a black cloak. Through one of the eyeholes, a single Sharingan could be seen. Tobirama could easily read his body language despite his face being covered. He was taken aback when he was discovered. Hitaki jumped up and took a defensive stance in front of him. His Anbu training instructed him to protect the Hokage from an unknown threat. Tobirama could sense a familiar seal on him even without the effect of genjutsu or being in such close proximity. It felt like a Hiraishin variant. Apparently, the fourth Hokage had fought this man back then. Tobirama came to a simple conclusion as a result of all these clues. This was the man responsible for the Kyuubi attack on Konoha and the death of the Yondaime 7 years ago. Who are you, and why are you trespassing in our village? Tobirama inquired, mostly to buy time for his Anbu guards to arrive. He could easily kill the man himself, but first he needed to be apprehended and interrogated about his motives. Tobirama needed some help to accomplish this. I am Uchiha Madara, the intruder replied, his voice surprisingly deep and unlike the original Madara's. Would it truly be considered trespassing if I had been the one responsible for founding this village? Uchiha Madara died in the Valley of the End over 50 years ago, Tobirama replied calmly. You seem awfully certain of that, Senju, Madara countered. It is clear that you were unaware of the true might of the Sharingan. Tobirama was about to respond that he had been fighting the Sharingan since before the masked man was born, when he noticed the chakra of the interloper's Sharingan matched the chakra of the Sharingan currently sitting in Hitaki's eye socket. Tobirama internally debated the merits of exposing the enemy in order to destabilize him and emotionally compromising his only backup at the time, recalling that specific mission report. With his current guard team only a few seconds away, Tobirama chose exposure over protection. You're Uchiha Obito, aren't you? You're the one who released the Kyuubi? He asked, before leaping forward to strike the clearly unbalanced, not expecting to be recognized enemy. With his Mokuton and ability to turn intangible, he proved to be a difficult opponent. Tobirama, on the other hand, had grown up sparring with Hashirama. And the intangibility issue was quickly resolved by sending chakra pulses through the Hiraishin seal left for them by Yondaime. They were strong enough to destabilize whatever jutsu he was employing to make himself intangible. With the help of his Anbu team, Tobirama was easily able to make the rogue Uchiha and cover him with enough captivity seals to contain a Biju. Hitaki had wisely decided to sit out the battle and was staring in horror and betrayal at his now unmasked teammate. Tobirama read the report on Uchiha Obito's mind walk given to him by Yamanaka Inoichi in his office hours later. He could almost feel the headache building as his mind automatically started forming various contingency plans against the Akatsuki. Needing to get away from the paperwork for a while, Tobirama made 2 shadow clones to continue the work in the office and teleported to the Hokage training grounds where he has instructed his apprenticeship to spar against Anbu Cat. When he arrived, he saw that another person had joined the sparring session, Uchiha Shisui, the young man who had given him a tour when he first arrived in the future. Tobirama was pleased to see that Itachi was easily keeping up with his two opponents and none of them were slouches. Kat's Mokuton and Shisui's highly developed Sharingan were on their own enough to make them threats, but along with their skill level, they were easily amongst the strongest shinobi of the village. Itachi had clearly been skilled before. There had to have been a reason for Hiraishin to induct him into Anbu at such a young age. But since his apprenticeship, he had improved in leaps and bounds even with minimal instruction because of Tobirama's busy schedule. The fact that he was able to get proper rest and food without being bogged down by mission after mission could also be attributed to his progress. He'd also gained some weight, moving him out of the dangerously underweight category. The bags under his eyes had significantly reduced, making him appear much younger. But the most significant change had occurred in his soul. It was therapeutic. Tobirama could see a small size on his face even as he sparred against two very difficult opponents. He couldn't stop himself from twitching his lips upwards. This was the reason Konoha was established. To protect and nurture the next generation. That ideal had been lost to time somewhere along the way. Tobirama, on the other hand, would bring it back kicking and screaming if necessary. The past is gone, but there is always hope for the future.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.